Okay, we come to chapter 13. Where'd you leave off with me?
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7, okay. I've been trying to point out how it seems to me that Matthew is organized. You've got that statement in chapter 4, in verse 23, that gives a summary about the ministry of Jesus, the broad view of the various elements of his ministry, his preaching and teaching, and his miracles, the miraculous activity. Then he, in chapters 5, 6, and 7, there's a full treatment of the teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, followed by illustrations of the miracles in chapters 8 and 9. But when you come to chapter 9 and verse 35, that verse almost word for word repeats chapter 4, verse 23. In other words, it's another summary of the ministry of Jesus. And it seems to me that he comes back and summarizes again in order to lead into the next main development. Now what we have all the way from that section, chapter 9:35 through about 16:20, I'm sort of debating with myself whether that I ought to include that the confession of Peter and what happens in connection with that, kind of a summary, kind of a showing what has happened up to that point and how things stand at the close of the ministry. But all the way from that section at the end of 9 into 16 there, it's a continuation of the ministry of Jesus in Galilee, but it seems to me at a later stage, because already in chapter 10 he's got the commission to the apostles and sends them out to do the work in Galilee. But then in chapter 11 it already appears that he's speaking of this generation as being an unbelieving generation. So his ministry's gone on long enough that it appears what the result is going to be. And then chapter 12 is this hostility of the Pharisees toward him, the challenges about the Sabbath and the controversy over that, and then worst of all, when they accuse him of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebub. Well, that brings us then to chapter 13, and I think that it continues on in somewhat the same vein. What is happening here, after he had that section in which Matthew illustrated for us what the teaching of Jesus was like and then what the miracles were like, then we get into this later stage where we're seeing sort of the results, and he's not going to be accepted. This initial excitement is kind of misleading. It's they're excited about the miracles, but they don't really understand. And so we continue on in that vein. And when we come to chapter 13, we've got a chapter filled with parables. Maybe I should have given this chapter the heading Parables of the Kingdom, because what these parables do for the most part is to explain various aspects of the kingdom. But he explains why he uses parables when the disciples ask him, and basically it's because of the state of mind of the people. What's going on here is a kind of a sifting of the crowds, and he uses parables that do some teaching, but it does it in such a way that it does not give too much to those that are unworthy of it. And he makes a difference between his disciples and those who have really listened and paid attention, and those who are superficial in their attitudes. And so what he's doing here is sifting this crowd. There's a kind of a testing of the crowds that go on here. And I think we'll see more of what's involved in this when we get into this second section of the of the chapter. But the first thing is the parable of the sower in verses 1 through 9. Just a parable given without explanation. On that day went Jesus out of the house, sat by the seaside, and there were gathered unto him great multitudes, so that he entered into a boat and sat. And all the multitude stood on the beach. He had a lot of different kinds of settings. The crowds are pressing in on him here. I think Matthew or Mark's account probably makes this clear. They're pressing in on him so much that he got to separate himself, so he gets out there in the boat and they're on the beach. So he gives this parable. Behold, the sower went forth to sow, and as he scattered the seed, it fell on all different kinds of soil. As he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. And that's the pathway that goes through the field. Everybody that passes through there would take that, and it'd be packed down, and no seed could get into the soil. So it's just lying there on the surface, and the birds come and get it. And then others fell on upon the rocky places where they had not much earth, and straightway they sprang up because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was risen, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. That's not rocky ground in the sense of scattered rocks, but the idea is a bedrock, because it goes on to say that they didn't have much earth. There was no deepness of earth, so you've got a bedrock and then just a shallow layer of soil on top of that. So seed fell on that. It came up very quickly, but then just as quickly it was scorched in the sun, withered away for lack of root. And others fell upon the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. And then fourth, and others fell upon the good ground and yielded fruit, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. And what he's going to say here, in explanation of his use of parables, he explains that he's really using parables because there's some people out there that would misuse the truth. They are unworthy. And yet, at the very end of this, in verse 9, when he says, "He that hath ears, let him hear," that says that you got to use your ears on this. There's more to this than just meets the eye in this story about the sower here. There's a lesson in this. So there's a call to give good attention to this. And what that seems to me to say is that anybody out there in that audience is put on notice from the beginning that there's something here for you to get. And anybody could have come and done what the apostles did, could have come and asked, what does that mean? But on the other hand, if they didn't have much interest, they'd listen to those things and say, well, that's nonsense, go just go home. And so the attitude of people determined whether they were going to get anything out of this or not. So in this next section then, the apostles ask him about this, the disciples, as they're called here, and he explains two things. First, he explains the reason for using parables generally, and then he's going to explain the parable of the sower particularly. In 10 to 17, the disciples came and said unto him, "Why speakest thou unto them in parables?" You know the definition of parable? Akin to the word parallel. You've got two parallel lines of things. This word it's almost the Greek word just changed into English letters. Para is the preposition, which means alongside of, and bole, parabole, that's the word we get ball from. In fact, I think that's the noun. The verb is parabolo. So you see ball in that. So a throwing or casting alongside. He does what he does with this parable of the sower. There's just observations about nature and the sowing of seed, the different kinds of soil and all that. And then alongside of that, what?
What he's trying to, what he means.
Yeah, it's some kind of spiritual lesson that's drawn from that. It's not a fable. It's not something that's just never could happen, like a fable where you got talking animals and things of that kind. It's all true to nature, but then there's a spiritual truth that's set alongside of that, so that there are these parallel lines that run alongside each other here in a parable. So they asked him why he spoke in parables, and his answer in verses 11 and 12 is that there's a discrimination to be made between different groups. And this is the reason that he's speaking in parables. And he answered and said unto them, unto you it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. Now, I think it's Mark or Luke 1 says them that are without. So there's the inner circle of the disciples, and then the crowds that come, them that are without. To you it's given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away, even that which he hath. That's kind of a parable. I used to read that when I was a boy and first started reading the Bible, and it sounded like, boy, that's not fair, that you more is given to the one that has, and the one that has not, even that which he has, be taken away. But it's a parable, or a kind of a proverb, and the fact is, it just couldn't be any other way. You can't study calculus till you've had some other preparations, mathematics. You can't study algebra 2 till you've had algebra 1, or advanced work in anything until you've had the preparation. It's only the one who already has something that more can be given. So what's happened here, Jesus has just begun giving his teaching, and there were some people that paid more attention to it than others. The apostles, and perhaps other people like them, that were really devoted to his teaching and listened, and gradually came to understand more of it. Even they were slow. But there were others that came and they were excited about the miracles, and they'd hear the report and great crowds would gather. But they didn't really have this deep interest and commitment, and so they didn't have anything. They didn't understand anything. Give them more? Well, they wouldn't understand it. They didn't have the foundation for understanding it. And so he goes on to explain verses 13 and 15. That's the reason that he speaks to them in parables. Therefore speak I to them in parables, because seeing they see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. And unto them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, and he quotes Isaiah 6, by hearing ye shall hear, and shall in no wise understand. Seeing ye shall see, and shall in no wise perceive. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. They are responsible. So this blindness, it's not that they didn't have ears to hear. They didn't use their ears. Their ears are dull of hearing. Their eyes they have closed. Lest haply they should perceive with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, should turn again, and I should heal them. And so he begins to speak in parables. Now, one of the things the points that Mark makes a little bit clearer, I think this is implied in Matthew, but it's directly said in Mark in chapter 4 and verse 11, and then again at the end. He says, I give you the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but them that are without, in parables. At the end of this then, in Mark 4:33 and 34, after giving all these various parables, that most of them we have here in Matthew, but it says, that at that particular time that he didn't speak without a parable to the multitudes, but then goes on to say, but privately he explained it all to his disciples. So I think this is the distinction, that his disciples come and they say, why are you speaking this way? And they'll ask, what does this mean? A little later on he gives the parable of the tares, and they say, what does it mean, this parable of the tares? Well, anybody could have done that. They could come, they could get more, and some of them sort of had all they wanted though, and they heard the parables, and they left, and they went home, and that was all the interest they had. And so what the use of these parables, what it does is to draw a line. It's to put people to the test, whether they're going to be a people with a heart to know, or whether their interest is just superficial. They like the idea of a miracle worker, a wonder worker, but they don't have any real interest in his teaching. It tests them. It puts them to the test. And so that's what's going on with these parables. Evidently he didn't use parables at first, but at this particular time with these crowds and their mixed levels of interest as they come out, and he begins to use parables, and it puts them to the test. There's kind of a sifting going on here. It's whether these people are going to be the good wheat or not. Then he turns to his disciples who are using their eyes and using their ears. There's a beatitude here, verse 16, and then explained in verse 17. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see the things which ye saw, and saw them not, and to hear the things which ye hear, and heard them not. And so the blessedness of those who use their eyes and use their ears and try to understand the thing that he's saying, instead of closing their eyes and coming with ears that are dull of hearing. Is that pretty understandable?
Yes.
I don't think we're dealing here with some, decree before the foundation of the world. Certain people that couldn't, they just predetermined they couldn't understand. These are people that come with different attitudes, and they can follow up on this. In fact, even the use of a parable, I've thought about this, that even those that didn't have the right attitude, who didn't immediately come and say, what does that mean? Still, this is the kind of thing that stick in your mind. You walk off and go home, and you begin to think about it. You can't forget it. And the fellow may begin scratching his head after a while and say, what does that mean? I'll go back. So he really does as much as he can do for people, but it discriminates between those that are going to have the good interest and those that don't. Then the parable of the sower is explained in verses 18 through 23. Hear ye then the parable of the sower. When anyone heareth the word of the kingdom, as soon as he says that, he implies that the seed is the word. You can just about fill in the blanks from there. It all becomes very clear just as soon as you see that he's talking about teaching the word. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and understands it not, then comes the evil one, snatcheth away that which hath been sown in his heart. This is he that was sown by the wayside. So those birds that got the seed off that hard ground, that's the devil coming. The word's been scattered out there, and it can't penetrate the kind of heart they've got. And so the devil snatches it away. Snatcheth away that which hath been sown in the heart. I've been thinking of some good illustrations of these different things. Back in chapter 12, And in verse 22, Jesus heals this demon-possessed man who was blind and dumb. He healed him so that he spake and saw. And all the multitudes were amazed and said, "Can this be the Son of David?" They were beginning to entertain the notion that this may be the Messiah. They're at least raising the question. But look at what follows. In verse 24, "But when the Pharisees heard it, they say, This man doth not cast out demons, but by Beelzebub, the prince of the demons." Well, verse 25 says, "Knowing their thoughts, he said unto them." So this is not something they said out loud to him. Not a confrontation with him. They're just getting around to the crowd. They say, "No, he can't be the Son of David. He just, these things that have impressed you so much that he's doing it by the power of the devil." It seems to me that's a good illustration of people. The seed is sown, or in this case, they see something, and there's an impression just lying there on their hearts, and they begin to ask, "Can this be the Son of David?" And here comes the devil, and he says, "No, that's not the Son of David. This thing that's making you think he is, that's by the power of the devil itself." So the devil doesn't come in his red suit, his forked tail. He comes with people like this, and they've got just that quickly just snatch the word away from some. And then the rocky ground, the bedrock with a thin layer of soil, where it sprang up quickly and then quickly withered away. "He that was sown upon the rocky places, this is he that heareth the word, and straightway with joy receiveth it, yet hath he not root in himself, but endureth for a while, and when tribulation or persecution ariseth because of the word, straightway he stumbleth." I think we've already had some people like that. Back in chapter 8, verses 18 to 22, Jesus is leaving one area, and this fellow comes running up, and he says, "I'll follow you wherever you go." And he says, "Well, the foxes have holes, and the birds of the heavens have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head." You're going to follow me wherever I go. You need to understand what you're letting yourself in for. So count the cost, in other words. And the fellow said, "I'll follow you, but first I got to go bury my dead father." And he says, "Let the dead bury the dead, and you come follow me and publish the kingdom." So first nothing, first the kingdom, then anything else. And anybody could bury the dead, but you need to follow the kingdom. So here are these that he's showing what's involved. And there are a lot of people that are excited like that. They like this fella. He hears, he sees the miracles. "I'll follow you anywhere." But be willing to go on these forced marches in the mud of the battlefield and go through all of this. You've got to count the cost. And there are a lot of people, when they come up against what it really involves, they just quickly then fall away. And then the thorny ground may be very fertile soil, but there are thorns in there as well. "He that was sown among the thorns, this is he that heareth the word, and the care of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, choke the word, he becometh unfruitful." So there maybe is a fellow like that rich young ruler that you read about in chapter 19, verses 20 to 22. He wanted to know what good thing he had to do in order to have eternal life. He said, "I've done all these things in the law." And Jesus said, "Well, you lack one thing. Sell what you have and give to the poor." It says he turned and went away sorrowful because he had much possessions. Those things for him were like thorns that in competition with the word sown in the heart, and eventually just choke it out if he didn't have a change of heart. That would explain why Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 6, where he would say, "Don't lay up your treasures on earth but in heaven." And he wouldn't want us to be anxious about these things. Those cares, the anxiety, it becomes like thorns that just choke out the word so that it can't become fruitful in us. And then in verse 23, the only successful sowing that got done he says, and he that was sown upon the good ground, this is he that heareth the word and understandeth it, who verily beareth fruit and bringeth forth some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. So it seems to me that he's teaching his apostles some things about the way the kingdom is going to come. John the Baptist was wondering why things were not happening faster. And he sent to him and asked whether he was the one that was to come or we had to look for somebody else. And I think John's problem was that the judgment that he had predicted, it was not coming as fast as he thought. Well, the kingdom does not just come all of a sudden, putting down all evil and setting people free. It comes with a sowing of the seed, the word of the kingdom. And all these kind of things are happening to it, depending on the kind of hearts that people have that it's sown into. I think, this is a good place to teach a good lesson for the young people that we teach in these classes. It's hard to miss this lesson when we give a little bit of explanation of these different things and then ask the question, what kind of heart are we going to have? That hard heart, the word can't even penetrate, or quickly responding but then not able to stand a test, thorny ground. Or are we going to be like the good soil?
When he says some will yield 100-fold, 60-fold, and 30-fold, is he referring to teaching others to become Christians and obeying the gospel, or is he comparing it to the good works that you would do as a benevolence?
Yeah. Well, I would say that wherever any fruit is born, that's the people that have plainly become Christians, and it just seems to me to speak to the situation that people bear different fruit according to different aptitudes and various ability that they have, and things of that nature, and just maybe according to the gifts that they're given. Then we come to the parable of the sower, of the tares, and he gives this parable, and this is one that the apostles have to ask him about, that they don't understand. Verses 24 to 30, he tells about and says the kingdom is like a man that sows good seed in his field, and then he's got this enemy, and he comes and just creates the greatest work of mischief in the night, sowing some weeds out there. And as it begins to come up, I'm told that these tares were things that would resemble wheat in the early stages. I couldn't tell the difference. And so when the servant asked this man, well, where'd these tares come from? And he understood that an enemy has done it. And he says, well, what are we going to do about it? Wilt thou, verse 28, wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? And he said, no, lest haply while you gather up the tares, you root up the wheat with them. There's just no way to root out the tares without rooting out the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and in the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, gather up first the tares, bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. So he leaves that without explanation, and a little bit further along they'll come back to him and ask for an explanation. Then comes the parable of the mustard seed, verses 31 to 32. I think maybe we can make short work of some of these more familiar things. The kingdom of heaven is like unto a grain of mustard seed, which a man took, sowed in his field, which indeed is less than all seeds. But when it is grown, it is greater than the herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the heaven come and lodge in the branches thereof. Kingdom of heaven is like that situation. And it seems to me that all of these, they're saying something about the kingdom. Some looking at one aspect of it, some another. And the particular thing here is the great disparity between the beginning, the small seed, and this ultimate manifestation of the kingdom. This seed, the less than all seeds, but it becomes a tree big enough that the birds come lodge in the branches thereof. It seems to me to put people on notice. Don't misunderstand what you're seeing. These small beginnings, where we've got just few that really understand very much or really are very interested. Don't misunderstand. Don't be discouraged by what you see. That's the way the kingdom is. Have these small beginnings, but you have to see what it's going to be in the end. And then the leaven says something else about the nature of the kingdom. Another parable spake he unto them, the kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took, hid in 3 measures of meal till it was all leavened. Yeast is what that was talking about. I think in those days, my understanding is that they would have this dough that fermented, and they would use some of that in the new batch of dough, and it would begin to penetrate, just gradually working its way through and influencing the whole of the meal that was mixed up there till it was all leavened. The kingdom is like that. It works in that quiet way, sort of almost secretive way, permeating. It's not something that with marching armies and warfare and things of that kind, but it's has an influence like leaven. After that one, there's a little more explanation about the use of parables in verses 34 and 35. All these things spake Jesus in parables unto the multitudes, and without a parable spake he nothing unto them. I think it's already very clear from what Matthew says that it was to the crowds that the parables were being given, and certainly he was saying something more to the disciples that were closer to him. Well, Mark, in the parallel, in Mark 4:33 and 34, just says that in so many words. That without a parable, he didn't speak to the crowds, but then he explained things. He expounded the meaning of these parables in private to his apostles. And then verse 35, he did that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken through the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things hidden from the foundation of the world. God speaking in that. I will do that. So I think that's not a matter of a messianic prophecy that's directly fulfilled in Jesus. But some of these things like this, what Matthew is doing is to say, you ought not to think these methods are strange or unusual. This is nothing more than what God himself said that he would do. In Psalm 78 and verse 2. So, in every way possible, for anyone who may have had some kind of a complaint about Jesus and his methods and all of this, he will justify the things that he does by making this kind of an appeal. All right, then they ask about the parable of the tares. And this is one of the difficult ones. What does this mean? That you just let the the weeds grow along with the good seed, the good plants, and just let them grow together till the harvest. And then the harvest has come and a separation is made. The tares are burnt up, the wheat's gathered into the barns. Well, 36 begins the explanation. Then he left the multitudes, went into the house, and his disciples came unto him, saying, Explain unto us the parable of the tares of the field. And he answered and said, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man, and the field is the world. I think that's one of the keys to understanding this. The field is the world, not the church, but the world. And the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom, and the tares are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy that sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are angels. As therefore the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be in the end of the world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that cause stumbling, them that do iniquity, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He that hath ears, let him hear. I made a list of the points that seems to me need some attention here. One, the field is the world, not the church. When people have trouble with something like 1 Corinthians 5, where it says, where the church is told to take that adulterous man, that man's got his father's wife, to withdraw from him and deliver him to Satan. And people wonder sometimes about how that can be consistent with this. Well, the application of this is the situation in the world, not the situation in the church. And so there's just no problem really with the teaching about withdrawing from somebody and those kind of separations and judgments that are made in the church, according to 1 Corinthians 5 and other passages. So, in the world, he sows the sons of the kingdom. But somebody else, there's other sowing that's going along. And it has to just go on until the end. A coexistence. The good ones and the evil. And the evil ones. This is the idea. And then there'll be a separation at the end. Judgment. And the angels sent forth, and they gather out of his kingdom all things that cause stumbling, them that do iniquity. It seems to me that after telling us that the field is the world, that the kingdom must be used in a wider sense than in those passages like chapter 16, verse 18 and 19, where he uses, says, on this rock I'll build my church, and then tells Peter, I'll give you the keys of the kingdom. He uses those interchangeably there. But here, the kingdom, it's the divine government, the reign of the Messiah, and it seems to be universal to refer to the same thing as the world, rather than being equal to the church here. And so then things just go on in the world in this way, with the evil and the righteous coexisting unto the end. And then there's judgment and separation, punishment of the wicked. And then verse 43 says, Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Romans chapter 8, and, I think it's verse 18, talks about the revealing of the sons of God in their glory. They are veiled, as it were. And you can't, it's like not being able to see the difference between the wheat and the tares. And the righteous are like that. There's a passage in Colossians 3 in the early verses where he says, our life is hid with Christ in God. Nobody can look at you and tell that you've got life in you. It's a hidden thing. Nobody can look at you and see that you're a son of God just by looking at you. But at the end, the distinction will be made and it'll be clear for all to see. That's the point of verse 43. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Well, this tape is going to run out on me here. I've taken two of them together because they've got a similarity and a difference. The parable of the hidden treasure and the parable of the pearl of great price. The kingdom of heaven is likened to a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid, and in his joy he goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is likened to a man that is a merchant selling goodly pearls, and having found one pearl of great price, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Seems to me that when you look at those and compare them, that in one way they're just alike. Both of them are giving this emphasis to the worth of the kingdom, the great value of it. A man finds this, and it's like a treasure in a field, like pearl of great price. You just sell everything that he had. It's worth whatever you have to pay to get it. So that's the similarity. But the difference is, one fellow just stumbles up on this treasury, or on this treasure in the field. This sort of unexpected good fortune. And in the other case, in the case of the pearls, the fellow was looking for something. So it seems that there is where, if there are two parables and one of them has a point that the other one doesn't have, well, that would seem to be the point here. And both of these things are true of different people. Finding the kingdom just becomes this kind of a surprise to some people. They're not really looking for it. But there are other people sense an emptiness, and they're looking for something. And when they find it, they're looking for pearls, and they find this one pearl that just surpasses all the rest.
It's like the Ethiopian eunuch was looking.
He was looking, yeah. And we probably could think of some others. For the Gentiles, at the end of Romans 9, he says they were not pursuing after righteousness. But when the gospel comes, I wondered whether that may be one of the distinctions that comes in here, that they were not looking for it. The parable of the dragnet has the fisherman going out and is cast into the sea, and it brings in all sorts of fish, and they're not all good. Some are good and some are not. I think this has to do with this work the apostles are going to be doing. He told them, "Come and I'll make you fishers of men," chapter 4, verse 19. And so he forewarns them here that you go out there and throw out that net, and it's going to bring in everything, and people with different motives, and not everybody is going to be of equally good heart. And so a separation, a sorting out has to take place, and that takes place at the end of the world. The angel shall come forth, sever the wicked from among the righteous, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. But the fact that you're getting all these different things, and you cast the net and you complain and you say, "Oh, why am I getting this?" Well, you got to keep on casting that net. Just different things. He's training apostles. He's making them fishers of men, and he's teaching them all these different things that they need to know.